Thank you, and good afternoon. First off, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me today. I know I'm the only non-Penang person here, but I feel like I'm one of you because you've made me feel so welcome. So thank you very much. Let me start off by saying that I'd like to frame my presentation around children, because that's what I do. I'm a child activist. And so the issue of statelessness, and when we're talking about nationality, I'm really talking about children, marginalized children, for a fact. That's number one. Number two, I like quotes. I collect quotes. I think quotes say a lot about a person, but says a lot about me. So I tend to find quotes that reflect and express what I feel and what I think. So these are two of my favorite quotes. Okay, which you can't see. Because it's about children. No, but a person's a person no matter how small. Dr. Seuss, right? Children have the potential and rights to live, to play, to be educated, to have a family, to be loved. They are what's best about humanity, and they can also be what's worst about humanity. Children are our future. Children are the living messages we send at a time we will not see. They are our future. They tell the people that come after us what we are like, what we were like. They bring with them values, opinions, ideas. So it's very important that we take care of our children, and we don't. We don't protect our children very well in this country. We don't do right by children in this country. We deny rights to children in this country. And we have this whole idea that if it's our children, we'll take care of them, but if it's your children, we won't. And that's just not who we are as Malaysians. That was not how I was brought up. It's changed, and I don't know what has, but I know it has to get fixed. I want to share with you a story, and it's a personal story because it's how I got so involved with the issue of statelessness. I'll talk about the definitions and the UN conventions and definitions and all later, but I'm going to share this story with you. I have adopted children, and one of my child, my daughter, is 7 years old. Her name is Zara, and she's stateless. She was actually a baby that I was asked to pick up. Unfortunately for me, I tend to do a lot of picking up of children. It gets confusing at some time. I keep telling everybody I'm a child protector, not a child collector. But everybody has my phone number, and everybody calls me and tells me, please pick up this child. Very much like how you pick up stray dogs and cats, I pick up children in Malaysia. So I get this call in April of 2008, asking me to pick up this child in another town, and to see if someone would adopt her, because I do a lot of work on adoption as well. And I went there, I jumped into, my mother would so kill me if she actually heard this story, and she should, but she hasn't. I actually jumped into the back of a car of strangers I didn't know, because they told me they were going to take me to go see this child. So I get to this place, and there's this baby. And you know, there's the whole story. I think many of you are aware of the issue of baby selling in this country and how we buy and sell children, and because of the adoption law, etc., etc. So anyway, so this baby's there, and it turns out, of course, it's a baby selling syndicate. But I'm not leaving her there. So I go outside. It's a Saturday. I go outside, and I make calls to NGOs, to Naganita, who does a lot of work on trafficking, and I say, what do I do? And she says, get the child out. I said, okay, hang on 1 minute. Then I called welfare and I said, what do I do? They said, leave the child. If you take the child and you give money, you're breaking the law. And I said, okay. Then I make another call to the police. I go, what do I do? It's like, leave the child there. And I said, okay, I'm taking the child. It was just an instinct. It wasn't thinking, but I was definitely not leaving her there. The situation was that she had actually been sold to a family for $16,000, and the mother-in-law of the childless couple thought that she was too dark, so she was returned. And so the price, her price, had dropped to 10,000 ringgit. And so my lucky thing was it was a Saturday, so no ATM. I couldn't go withdraw above a certain amount, because I couldn't. I didn't have that money. Number two, it was Saturday, so I couldn't go to the bank, so I had an excuse. So I told the traffickers, the syndicate, you let me take her home, I can show you where I live, and I will get you the money by Monday. But you know what? You come with me, you'll see my house and everything. And they actually said, okay. So anyway, long story short, I took her to the clinic first with the traffickers, with these people, and texted the top doctor and said, just don't say anything, just tell me how old you think this child is. They're saying this child is 2.5 months old. Of course, the auntie who's talking to me in Mandarin, which I don't understand a word, which is being translated, tells me, "We're really on." She's born on the 18th of February, 2008, so she's about 2.5 months old. A month and a half. Was it May? Anyway, it was 2.5 months. So we go to the doctor, who's a friend, and she does all the simple tests to see if it's about right. And she says, yeah, 2.5 months, roughly, about right. So I said, okay, great. So I got the money, I called welfare, I gave the money, got the police, and told the police where I had been. Of course, I don't know the exact address, but I said roughly here, and I kind of knew how to go. Anyway, they go there, the syndicate's gone. What happens next is the tragedy. The tragedy isn't that she was bought and sold. The tragedy was that she was stateless. We had no proper documents of being able to tell how old she was, really, except going by what the doctor had said. We had no idea who her parents were. We couldn't return her. We couldn't do anything. And I was certainly not going to return the child and put her in a welfare home. At the time, in 2008, the anti-trafficking law had just come out. It was actually introduced in November 2007 and had been implemented in March 2008. This was my first case with syndicate. Yes, I'm an activist first. I turned into a mother after, but I was not going to leave her with welfares and a system that didn't know how to protect the child because they never worked with trafficked children, nor acknowledged that there were victims and baby selling who were in this situation. And ladies and gentlemen, for all intents and purposes, you should know that any child who's been identified as a victim of trafficking or foundlings, babies who have been found, abandoned, with no papers, are all stateless. Yeah? So, just to give you an idea, so we have all these children. My daughter's case isn't done. She's 7. I went to court. I adopted her formally. I applied for a birth certificate. I got it 5 years later. There's problems with even getting a birth certificate, which does not guarantee citizenship. There's a clause in the application for citizenship, for birth certificates rather, that says you have to have 2 witnesses to say where she was born. I couldn't even apply for a proper birth cert. I had to get special permission from the Ministry of Home Affairs to be able to even apply, and I actually signed for her birth cert and 25 other children to make sure that I could get them birth certs with special permission from the minister. So it's always good to network. So anyway, stateless children. So they're voiceless, they're at risk. Why bother, right? The reason is there are about 125,000 to 150,000 stateless people in this country, of which 40% are children. By 2020, the numbers are estimated to go up to 1 million. 1 million people with no papers, no documents, and no idea of how they're going to fend for themselves. They're actually worse off than refugees because registered refugees actually have cards, and unregistered refugees and asylum seekers actually have papers to prove where they're from. Stateless people can't. If you want to have a rough idea of how many stateless people there are in the world, it's the combination of population of Denmark and Norway. It's about 10 million. There are 13 million refugees in the world. 10 million is a lot, which also includes refugees. What are you going to do with all these people? UNHCR has the mandate for statelessness in the world, and they also have the mandate for refugees, but they cannot cope with statelessness because statelessness is also covers internally displaced people who cannot go anywhere. So what are we going to do? So what is the UN definition of statelessness? It means someone who is not considered a national by any state under the operation of the law. That's the technical definition. But the truth of the matter is they're completely invisible. They do not exist. I tell you, my daughter's name is Zahra Hana Abdullah. Until 2 years ago, she did not exist. So guess what's going to happen in terms of protection? So under the UN definition, there are 2 kinds of categories. You have the de facto or in fact, which includes Rohingyas, where they have left persecuted or denied nationality because of war, because of race, because of religion, like the Rohingyas. And you have the stateless de jure. I always think it's soup, but it's not. It's in law, which means that they focus on the existence or absence of a formal bond of nationality. So trafficked children like my daughter, abandoned children like my daughter, are all stateless, right? So we have UN legal instruments that we can use to protect children, because what do you do in the meantime, right? So you have the 1954 UN conventions relating to the state of stateless persons, and you have the 1961 UN conventions on the reduction of statelessness, both of which Malaysia hasn't signed. Okay, because we get mixed up between migrants and refugees and foreigners and stuff. Stateless children, for all intents and purposes of the numbers I've dealt with, which are in the hundreds, 90% end up being Malaysians. That's the truth. Because at the end of the day, you're talking about generations and generations and generations of children who have never registered their birth certificate or have moved or came into this country. I promise you, and I told the authority this, my daughter did not crawl into this country at 2.5 months old, nor does she have biological parents hiding behind trees, waiting to come out and declare that they want nationality because I adopted her and I want to give her citizenship. It's just not how it works. So you have all these different categories, which I can give you handouts after this, but just to give you an idea. So you have all these children, and it is the duty and it is the requirement and a demand that the government of Malaysia protect all these children for numbers of reasons. We don't even have to talk about the UN Convention on the Rights of Children. Let's just talk about the Child Act 2001, whose amendments will happen this October. And we say in the preamble to the Child Act that all children are entitled to protection and assistance, but it's not implemented. And I want to know why, you know? So there was a statement in the papers by a certain minister who belongs to Home Affairs that actually said that we have no stateless people, no stateless children in this country. Guess what? We have 7 categories of statelessness, stateless children in this country. We have children in Malaysia who are born in Malaysia and undocumented. We have children who are born overseas whose parents are not, their marriage is not recognized. We have those born to undocumented or unwed parents. We have children who are here from conflicts of the law, okay, which we don't have in Malaysia actually, fleeing wars, conflict situation, Rohingyas, trafficked children, foundlings, and so on and so forth. So what's to become of them? You know, they don't have citizenship. This is my worry. My daughter is 7. She's only going to be a child and entitled to protection as a lot of other stateless children till they're 18, and then they're considered an adult. She's not allowed an IC, she's not allowed any identity, no passport, no right to work, no right to get married, no right to own property. She cannot leave the country. She has to stay and she cannot get a job. What is going to happen to her? So we need to think of ways in which we can protect children. We need to look at ways in which we can do things. You cannot say, this is not your problem. If you read in the papers every day almost, you hear of children being chopped into 15 pieces. You hear of children being murdered in toilet bowls. You hear children being abandoned by tires, etc. And you need to figure out, like, what are we going to do? This is our problem. I used to think that children was the only thing I worked on, but you cannot protect children without adults, and you cannot protect children without communities, and you cannot, in your right mind and conscience, allow children, marginalized children, whether it's 125,000, 500,000, even one, to fall through the cracks and have nothing. Because, as we said at the beginning, drama effect. Einstein was stateless for a long time. Madeleine Albright was stateless for a long time. We need to see what these children can do and allow them to live up to their full potential. We need to know that they can contribute. My daughter is a poet. I swear she's the best poet in the whole world. You know, and there are so many children. And we need to present to the government different ways and recommendations in which we can work with stateless children and look at them, because they absolutely have nowhere else to go. Unless you're planning to line all them up, shove them out to the boats with the refugees, or shoot them, they're here to stay. So you need to figure out what to do. So why does nationality matter? Because it costs 7 times more to build, to do intervention programs than it is to prevent. And it's so simple, because stateless laws and definitions are man-made. You can change them, they're policies. Why do we need to take care, and why does nationality matter? Because my daughter and everybody else like her has a right to say, my name is Arahana, I exist, I live, and I want to be here. And that is why we need to look at the issue. And because those 10 million out there, outside of Malaysia, they're going to grow. And guess what? Whether you like it or not, they're our problem. So thank you very much.